Everyone, it's Doll Princess and welcome to another video. If you're new to my channel, welcome, and if you are returning, welcome back. So today is going to be part 1 of Let's Read Goosebumps. This one is Goosebumps Most Wanted by R.L. Stine Zombie Halloween. I picked this up at my local Walmart store and I've always been a really big fan of R.L. Stine and I haven't read this book yet, so we're going to do it together on camera. So on the back of the book it also says like kind of what it's about, so I'll read that now. It says, what happens at this house on Halloween? Kenny Manzaniti was the new kid in town. His family moved back into an old house to help take care of his grandfather. Everyone in his new neighborhood is obsessed with zombies, even Grandpa Mo. But then a new family moves in next door and their choice of furniture is interesting. Kenny is convinced that there is something strange about the new neighbors, but his parents won't listen to him. So Kenny and his friends go in for a closer look. A bad idea on any day, but definitely the wrong choice around Halloween. Will Kenny survive long enough to go trick-or-treating? So, the cover on the book is really cool, like some really spooky looking zombies and a really cool bordered up house. And I love this sky here. That's really cool. And of course at the top they have to advertise now a major motion picture because they do have Goosebumps books like turned into movies, and I believe there's a new one coming out here before too much longer. I'm not sure when the exact release date is, but they're adding another movie, which is really cool. So then you open up the book, it says Zombie Halloween. Okay, so let's see. It says, welcome, you are most wanted. Come in, I'm R.L. Stine. Welcome to the Goosebumps office. Glad you made it through the barbed wire fence. Don't worry, those cuts will stop bleeding in an hour or two. Okay, let's see. Why do we have a barbed wire fence? To keep the abominable snowman from escaping. I'm surprised you didn't see him. He's creeping up right behind you. Hurry, step aside and shut the door. You don't want to find out why everyone calls him abominable. Hey, don't be scared of Eddie over there. Eddie woke up dead tired one morning. Guess what? He actually was dead. Yes, Eddie is a zombie, but he doesn't like that word. He likes to be called life-challenged. He's not much trouble. He only needs to eat human flesh once a day. Don't be nervous. He just finished his breakfast. Whom did he have for breakfast? I'm not sure, but I haven't seen my brother all morning. Eddie, what did I tell you about eating the family? Oh well, let me ask you a question before Eddie has to have his next meal. What do you think is the most wanted holiday? You're right, it's Halloween. It's the most fun night of the year, and it can be the scariest. A boy named Kenny Manzaniti is going to tell you about his Halloween. Kenny and his sister Tricia moved into a creepy old house that looked like it should be in a horror movie. They didn't believe all the scary stories they heard about the house. They decided to have a Halloween party to meet the kids in their new neighborhood. But they had some unexpected guests. You see, the house stood across the street from a graveyard, and some people buried there, hideous, rotting zombies, decided to make this a zombie Halloween. And it goes to part 1, 1944. All right, chapter 1. A chill rolled down my back as my friend Ivy and I gazed up at my new house. The house was dark, gray, with peeling paint. Black shutters tilted at the dust-smeared windows. Under the sloping roof, one attic window was broken and covered with cardboard. The wind whistled into the window high above our heads. It sounded like someone screaming. I wanted to scream. It's a haunted house, I said. It belongs in a horror movie. Your mom will get it cleaned up, Mario, Ivy said. I knew Ivy for a couple of weeks. She was the first friend I made since we moved to Franklin Village. She was cheerful Miss Sunshine all the time. I told her that. She said, I'd rather be Miss Sunshine than someone howling at the full moon. Does that make any sense? Ivy was always saying things like that, but I liked her anyway. She was cute. She was 12 like me, tiny with a pointed chin and pointy little nose. Like an elf in the picture books my mom used to read to me when I was little. She had short blonde hair and green eyes. And she usually wore the same green sweater with a lacy white collar. I guess because it matched her eyes. I couldn't get to sleep last night, I said. I kept hearing a tap, tap, tap above me. I knew what it was. It was mice running across the ceiling. Tap, tap, tap is better than thump, 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 Ivy said. That made me laugh. I turned away from the house. It made me sad that Mom and I had to live in such a creepy old wreck of a place, but we really had no choice. My dad was in Germany fighting the war, and Mom was working 2 factory jobs to earn enough money for us to get by. I almost never saw her. You're the man of the house now, Mario, Mom told me the day we moved into this horrible place. It's a tough time for everyone, and being gloomy isn't going to help. But Gloomy is my middle name, I said. Mario Gloomy Manzaniti. I was trying to make her laugh. She hardly ever smiled these days, and she had these lines under her eyes she never had before. She swept her black hair behind her shoulder. Promise me you'll do your best, she said. I raised my right hand and swore I'd do my best. We are lucky to have a house, Mom said. Luckily, I repeated. She tugged at my brown leather bomber jacket I liked to wear because it made me look tough. Mario, that jacket is getting small on you, she said. I'll try not to grow anymore, I told her. I tightened my stomach and hunched down to my knees. That made her laugh. Now, Ivy and I stood in front of the house with the October wind gusting around us. Fat brown leaves danced around our legs. I guess the worst part is living across the street from a graveyard, I said. Ivy poked me in the ribs. Are you scared? She asked in a sing-song voice. Is little Mario scared of a graveyard? I'm not scared, I said, poking her back. It's just depressing. Oh, big word, she said. So, you live in a haunted house across the street from a graveyard. What is the big deal? The truth is, maybe I was a little scared. I'm not a tough guy. Sometimes I have nightmares that make me wake up all sweaty and shaky. And I've never been in a fight with another kid. I always find a way to talk my way out of fights. When I was little, I pretended to be Superman or Captain Marvel, the new comic book heroes. I wore a towel for a cape and had my underpants over my pajama pants. And I ran around pretending to leap tall buildings in a single bound. I think I really believed there were these powerful guys in capes and tights who were around to fight bad guys and protect everyone else. But then my dad went off to war, and I had to grow up a little and forget that comic book stuff. Ivy leaned into the wind and trotted across the street, her blonde hair bouncing behind her. Hey, wait up, I shouted. Where are you going? I could see where she was headed, into the graveyard. Our shoes crackled over the brown leaves as we followed a path through the tilted stone graves. Wind gusts made the old gravestones creak and groan. Why don't we go to the candy store instead? I asked. I pointed to a little store on the corner past the graveyard. I have a nickel. We could load up on root beer barrels and licorice sticks. Mom said not to ruin my appetite for dinner, Ivy said. Don't you like walking in this place? Some of the graves are so old. It's my first time, I said. The sky darkened. I looked up and saw storm clouds rolling overhead. The wind rattled the limbs of the old trees behind us. I shivered. I raised the collar of my bomber jacket. My eyes gazed all around. The blowing, crackling leaves made the whole place seem alive. Ivy pointed. That grave is so tiny. Do you think a child was buried there? Before I could answer, I saw something that made me gasp. I grabbed Ivy's arm. "Look, Ivy, something just moved by that tombstone." We both stared into the gray light. "Oh no!" I moaned. I watched, trembling in horror, as someone climbed out of a grave. Chapter 2. I squeezed Ivy's arm. We both froze and watched. Dressed all in black, the terrifying figure kept his face down. He stepped from behind the tall gravestone, raised his arms in front of him, and began staggering stiffly toward Ivy and me. "No! Oh no!" Another moan escaped my throat. And then the staggering creature raised his head, and I screamed. "Anthony, you jerk!" My little brother tossed back his black hood and burst out laughing. He was a high, shrill hyena laugh that makes me want to strangle him. But I grabbed him by the shoulders instead and shook him hard. "You little rat, you scared us to death." That made Anthony laugh even harder. Ivy laughed too. "He got you this time, Mario." "Me?" I cried. "Me? You were scared too, Ivy." "No, I wasn't," she said. "I was only pretending." The sky grew even darker, and I heard the rumble of thunder in the distance. Let go of me," Anthony said. I didn't realize I was still gripping his shoulders. He stamped hard on my right foot. "Ow!" I uttered a cry and staggered back. Anthony laughed again. "He's a little creep. He's always following me around trying to scare me. I'd like to smash him, but as the man of the house, my job is to watch over him and take care of him as best as I can. The truth is, I can't really hate him, mainly because he looks just like me. We both have thick, wavy black hair, round faces, dark eyes, and we're tall and kind of beefy." "Look what I found," Anthony said. He grabbed my hand and started to pull me along the grassy path between the graves. The wind felt wet. It shook the trees and sent the dead leaves skipping over the old tombstones. "Look," Anthony said, pointing down. Ivy and I stared at a deep hole in the ground. "It's an open grave," Ivy said. I shivered again. I pulled my jacket tighter. "It's an open grave? Waiting for someone?" I murmured. I grabbed Anthony. "Maybe it's waiting for you." He pulled away. "Maybe it's waiting for someone named Mario," he said. His dark eyes flashed. "I dare you to jump down there." My eyes darted over the grave. It was deep, and the mud walls were black. Even in the dim light, I could see fat worms crawling over the grave floor. Ivy laughed. "What's so funny?" I snapped. "Your face," she said. "You look so terrified." "It's just a mud hole, Mario." "No, it isn't," I replied. "Someone dug this for a dead person. It isn't a hole, it's a grave." "I knew you couldn't do it," Anthony said. He jumped up and down like he'd won a big victory. "I'm braver than you are. I'm braver than you are." Ivy turned to me. Her green eyes locked on mine. "Go ahead, jump in," she whispered. "Don't let Anthony win." I'd let him win. I squinted into the grave. I watched the worms crawling in the mud at the bottom. It looked so dark and disgusting down there. But I had just met Ivy. I didn't want her to think I was a coward. I stepped to the edge. Should I do it? Should I jump? Before I could decide, someone gave me a hard shove from behind. "Hey!" I let out a scream and went sailing into the grave. Chapter 3. Ow! I landed hard on my elbows and knees. Pain shot down my whole body. I struggled to climb to my feet. The strong smell of mud floor rose to my nostrils. Wet clumps of dirt smeared my hands. Ivy and Anthony peered down at me. I growled and shook my fist at my brother. "You pushed me, you rat!" "I'll get you. I'm not kidding. You'll be sorry, you jerk." Anthony's eyes grew wide. "But I didn't, he stammered. Mario, I swear, I didn't push you. Liar, I screamed. You dirty liar. I tried to rub the mud off my hands and legs of my jeans. I never touched you, Anthony insisted. He's telling the truth, Ivy called down. The wind gusted hard, almost drowning out her voice. She brushed her hair out of her eyes. I was watching him, Mario. He didn't push you. Oh, yeah, I snarled. Someone shoved me down here. Who was it? Ivy laughed. Maybe it was a ghost. Rain started to come down, big, heavy drops that made a splat sound on the muddy grave floor. I rubbed my back. It still ached from the hard push. I don't believe in ghosts. Anthony had to be lying. He pushed me. It's the kind of thing Anthony likes to do. Ivy was just trying to protect him. Rain slapped the sides of the grave. Get me out of here, I said. It's too deep. I can't climb out by myself. Ivy had her hands on her knees. She bent over the grave. You can't climb up the side? It's too muddy, I said. I'll just slide right back down. She turned to Anthony. Come help me. They both reached down for me. I raised my arms to them. They each grabbed a hand and tugged. I saw the dirt at the side of the grave crumble away. No! Ivy screamed as she started to fall. I staggered back as they both came tumbling into the grave. Anthony landed on his feet. His body appeared to bounce, but he kept his balance. Ivy landed face down in the mud. I don't believe this, I muttered. I grabbed Ivy by the shoulders of her sweater and helped her up to her feet. She blinked a few times, stunned. Then she grinned at me. I wasn't expecting a mud bath today, she said. Look at me, I'm dripping in the mud. So this is what pigs feel like. Cheerful, always cheerful. I'm not happy right now, Anthony murmured. Going down into the grave was your idea, I said. He shook his head. I wanted you to go into the grave, not me. The raindrops came down harder. Above us, I could hear the wind swirling through the graves. I dug both hands into the grave wall and tried to climb, but my hand slid right back down. The mud fell off in big clumps. Lightning crackled above us. We've got to get out of here, I said. With another word, all three of us began to scream. Help! Help us! Can anyone hear us? Somebody, help! Chapter 4. We didn't scream for long. We knew the graveyard was empty. We hadn't seen another person anywhere nearby. Besides, the wind was howling so loudly it drowned out our shouts. The rain pounded down. My hair was matted to my head. I kept wiping raindrops from my eyes. I felt cold water seep into my shoes. I gazed down and saw the deep puddles were spreading across the mud of the grave floor. Worms crawled over my feet and up my pant legs. Ivy started to hop up and down to keep warm, I guess. We can't figure this out, she said. Mario, give me a boost. She moved to a grave wall. I cupped my hands under her shoes and pushed. Her hands scattered at the top. The dirt gave way and she started to slide back down, but I held her steady. I gave her another push. She dug her fingers into the mud and, with a groan, hoisted herself out of the grave. She disappeared from view for a few seconds. I heard her give a cheer. Then she returned, peering down at Anthony and me. Give me your hands, she said. Anthony shoved me from behind. Ivy tugged me out. Then we both pulled Anthony up. The cold, swirling wind made me shiver. All three of us were soaked and covered with mud. Lightning crackled again, followed by a boom of roaring thunder. Let's get out of here, I shouted. I led the way, ducking our heads against the rain. We took a few running steps toward my house, and then we froze. Voices whispered all around us, voices carried by the wind, behind us, ahead of us, everywhere. Just the rain, I murmured. Every muscle in my body tensed. I listened to the whispers, and I knew it couldn't be the wind. I heard their words so clearly. Visit me. Come to me. Visit me. I'm so lonely. Hoarse, raspy voices. Voices from the graves? The dead and buried, calling to us, pleading with us. I pressed my hands over my ears. I tried to shut them out, but I could still hear their hoarse cries. Come here. Come over here. I won't hurt you. I'm so lonely. And then I screamed in horror when a bony hand squeezed my shoulder from behind. Chapter 5. Struggling to catch my breath, I spun around. Anthony! He raised both hands. I didn't do anything. You lawyer, you grabbed me. I grasped the front of his coat and angrily pulled him toward me. No, I didn't touch you, he protested. I swear. He pulled free of my grasp. Ivy stepped between us. He didn't grab you, Mario, she said. Stop acting crazy and let's get home. Acting crazy? Was it crazy? I could still hear the voices all around. Someone pushed me into that grave, and someone squeezed my shoulder. Someone, living or dead. I realized my whole body was trembling. Would I remember this day as the scariest day of my life? The three of us began to run again. Ivy turned at the street. I'm going home, she cried. This is too scary. See you later. I watched her run toward her house on the next block. Anthony and I darted up the front steps to our house. We're going from a haunted graveyard to a haunted house, I muttered. Our new house isn't haunted, Anthony said. It's just old. Old and haunted, I insisted. I fumbled with the front doorknob. The old wooden door was stuck. It took all of my strength to pull it open. We burst inside, both breathing hard, shaking off rainwater. I was desperate to tell Mom what happened in the graveyard, but she wasn't home. She was at one of her jobs. Anthony and I tossed our wet clothes in the laundry hamper. We dried ourselves off and pulled on clean t-shirts and jeans. Mom had left a pot of tomato soup on the stove with instructions on how long to cook it. I found a loaf of bread and made cheese sandwiches for the two of us. Anthony and I ate our lunch at the kitchen table. We didn't talk much. I kept seeing the deep, dark hole of the graveyard and the worms and the mud and hearing the howling wind and the whispered, raspy voices. They played in my mind like a horror movie. Anthony was probably thinking the same frightening thoughts. Neither one of us wanted to talk about any of it. Ivy came over before lunch was over. She wore a long black skirt and a different green sweater. She finished the tomato soup in the pot and ate the second half of my cheese sandwich. Graveyards can make you hungry, she said, smiling as always. Don't mention the graveyard, I said. Do you have any cookies, she asked. She started opening the cabinet drawers. She pulled out a box of graham crackers. Oh, I love graham crackers. I would eat a whole box. We passed around the graham crackers. Where does your mom work? Ivy asked. At the box factory downtown, I said. She's some kind of secretary. My mom is a bank teller, Ivy said. Does she ever bring home any staples? Anthony asked. That made us laugh. Sometimes Anthony can be funny. When he isn't being a complete pest. I couldn't shake off the scene in the graveyard. I couldn't think about anything else. It was like the graveyard was alive, I said. Ivy's expression turned serious. She set down the box of graham crackers. My brother, Stan, he's always reading. He's a real bookworm. Stan read a book about zombies. Zombies? I asked. She nodded. Yeah, you know, dead people who come back to life, and all they want to do is eat human flesh. Yum, Anthony said. He crunched up a cracker between his teeth. Flesh, I love it. Shut up, I snapped. You don't even know what flesh is. Do too. I had a graham cracker in front of me on the table. He smashed it with his fist. You'll eat that, I said. Cut it out, you two, Ivy said. Don't you realize we might have heard zombies in the graveyard this morning? Don't you think those whispers we heard? Stop, I said. I pressed my hands over my ears. Anthony laughed. My big brother Mario is afraid of zombies. Afraid they'll want to eat you? He turned and bit my arm. Hey, that hurt! I gave him a hard shove. He tossed back his head and laughed again. What a little creep. I turned back to Ivy. I don't believe in zombies, I said. I don't believe in ghosts, and I don't believe in dead people whispering in graveyards. She shrugged. We heard something, Mario. It wasn't just the wind. Let's do something, I said. I was desperate to change the subject. I was scared. I mean, really scared. But I didn't want Ivy to know. I jumped up and pushed my chair in. Let's go to the den and play some records. My dad has a pretty good collection of jazz records. I started to lead them down the hall toward the den. There was a stack of cartons at the end of the hall. Mom hadn't had time to unpack everything. Ivy stopped and peered into a doorway. Hey, you have a basement. My house doesn't have a basement. Have you been down there? No, I said. Not yet. Why don't we explore your basement? Ivy said. She pulled the door all the way open. Maybe there are some amazing treasures down there. Who owned this house before you? I shrugged. Beats me. I think the house was empty for a long time. I mean, look at it. I pointed to the broken floorboards. Then I raised my eyes to the peeling paint on the walls. It's a total wreck. Mario doesn't want to go in the basement, Anthony chimed in. He's too scared. Shut up, Anthony, I snapped. Why don't you go up to your room and amuse yourself? Why don't you go fly a kite? Come on, you two, Ivy pleaded. Follow me. She turned and started down the basement stairs. I really didn't want to go. That little creep Anthony was right. I was scared. Actually, I was still shaken from our cemetery adventure, but I had no choice. I had to follow Ivy. I grabbed a flashlight from the supply closet, and I started down the wooden stairs. They were very steep and narrow and covered with a layer of slippery dust. They creaked and groaned under our feet. My flashlight beam swept up and down over the basement floor. The air grew cooler as we headed down. A sour odor sitting on my legs, and they were falling asleep. Let me adjust myself. Okay. My flashlight beam swept up and down over the basement floor. The air grew cooler as we headed down. A sour odor greeted my nose. I stopped halfway down. I realized my heart was pounding in my chest. One thought flashed through my mind. This house is so creepy. Are we going to find something horrible down here? Chapter 6, page 25. We huddled at the bottom of the stairs. A small rectangle of light spread in front of us on the floor. Light from upstairs. My flashlight beam darted over the bare basement walls. It stinks down here, I muttered, and it's cold as a refrigerator. Ivy took a few steps into the darkness. It's a pretty big basement, she said. And look, it's filled with junk. I swept the light past her. I saw stacks of cardboard cartons, piled of tattered newspapers, a long rack of old-fashioned looking clothes, long skirts and frilly blouses. Even in the dim light, I could see that the clothes were moth-eaten and stained. Ivy walked over to the clothes. Anthony and I followed her. Anthony pulled an old magazine off a pile. It crumbled in his hands. That's ancient, he said. Someone moved out of this house a long time ago, Ivy said, and just left all this stuff down here? I wonder why. I swept the beam of light around in a circle. It always takes weeks to clean out this place, I said. Oh, it would take weeks to clean out this place, I said. Ivy bent down and lifted some boxes from a large straw basket. Board games, she said. Old board games. Maybe some of these are still fun to play. But then she made a disgusting face and let them back down into the basement. Back down into the basket. Now I'm seeing things. Okay. Oh, they're covered in mold, and they all smell so terrible. I squeezed my nose. This whole basement smells like rotten meat, I said. Why does it stink so bad? Maybe because of this dead mouse, Anthony said. I swung the light beam around, and I watched Anthony pick up a headless, half-decaying mouse by the tail. Drop it, I cried. Are you crazy? Holding the tail in 2 fingers, he swung it in front of him. An evil grin spread across his face. Here, catch, he said. He heaved the dead mouse at me. I tried to dodge away, but it smacked me in the chest. I staggered back. The flashlight fell out of my hand and clattered onto the cement floor. Anthony laughed his shrill hyena laugh. And then he went bonkers. Oh, and then I went bonkers. I grabbed the flashlight, and with a ferocious growl, I went charging at Anthony. He probably thought I was going to hit him with the flashlight, but I would never do anything like that to my kid brother. Instead, I lowered my shoulder and butted him backward with all my strength. No! He let out a cry as he lost his balance. He stammered hard into a stack of cartons. The big boxes toppled from side to side and then came crashing down. I gasped as a huge box landed on Anthony, flattening him to the floor. One arm poked out from under his carton. He didn't move. He didn't make a sound. I froze in terror, staring at him flat on his back under the box. Ivy ran over to him and dropped to her knees beside him. You crushed him, she screamed. Mario, you crushed your brother. Chapter 7. No, oh no! A cry scraped my throat. I dove beside Ivy and stared down at my brother, at the arms sticking out so lifelessly from under the huge box. And then I heard Anthony giggle. Ivy and I blinked at each other. I raised both of my hands and gave the carton a push. It practically flew off Anthony. It was light as a feather. Anthony raised his head and grinned. Were you scared? He laughed again He laughed again and scrambled to his feet before I could punch him. My heart was still pounding. You scared Ivy and me to death, you creep!